Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating and sometimes, let's say, intense set of sources. We've got excerpts from a YouTube transcript. It features Joe Rogan and Patrick Bet-David, and their subject, well, it's Michelle Obama.
Yeah, and for this deep dive, our goal is really to, break down their critique. We want to pull out the key points they're making and just examine how a public figure's image, their accomplishments, or perceived accomplishments, and their media presence get scrutinized.
Exactly.
We'll be impartial here, just sticking to what the source material actually presents. We're aiming to help you understand the arguments being made without us taking a side.
Right. So get ready for a conversation that, well, promises to be interesting. We'll be exploring commentary on everything from White House finances to public service and brand management. Okay, let's unpack this. So these sources, they immediately throw us into this very distinctive style of Rogan and Bet-David. It's quite charged. The transcript actually describes their conversation using some strong language, like a fiery exchange of facts, logic, and razor-sharp commentary.
And even calls it a surgical takedown disguised as casual banter. So how would you describe their approach here, based on what the sources say about how they analyze someone like Michelle Obama?
Well, it's interesting how the source frames their intention. It says they want to turn the spotlight around, aiming for zero fear and maximum clarity.
Okay.
They paint this picture of them dismantling a myth, as they put it, with methodical, sarcastic precision. So it's less of a direct debate. It's presented more like an in-depth dissection of what they see as contradictions or public narratives.
Right.
And even the descriptions of the hosts themselves, like Rogan's familiar half grin or Bet-David's eyebrows permanently arched like he's permanently suspicious, those descriptions kind of underscore this critical, maybe even skeptical viewpoint. It really sets the tone.
Yeah, the critical lens is clear right from the start. The source material brings up Michelle Obama's own statements about living in the White House. She was apparently slammed for whining about costs, suggesting, it's expensive to live in the White House.
Saying they had to pay for every food, every bit of food that you eat, and even travel. Only housing and staff were covered, according to those comments. It's presented as a picture of unexpected costs.
And this narrative the sources suggest about cost and hardship, it stands in pretty stark contrast when you look at the financial details they bring up.
Okay, yeah, what were those?
Well, Rogan and Bet-David, according to the source, point out that the Obama's net worth went from $1.3 million before the presidency to $12.2 million after 8 years in the White House. And the commentary even estimates their net worth today in 2025 somewhere between $70 and $250 million.
Wow, that's quite a range, but a big jump regardless.
A huge jump. And the source claims the press just eats it up like it's gourmet. This idea of financial difficulty, suggesting it gets accepted without much scrutiny, despite that reported financial growth.
And the commentary doesn't stop there, does it? It challenges this idea of relatability. It cites her interviews talking about how hard it was to adjust after the White House, supposedly from her $12 million 0-cent estate.
And there's even the claim mentioned that the White House felt like a prison, despite having, gourmet chefs, Secret Service protection in 132 rooms, state dinners and chandeliers.
Yeah.
So this contrast that this source presents, what does it imply about public perception of privilege?
Well, if we connect that to the bigger picture they're painting, Rogan and Bet-David seem to repeatedly question her substantive achievements as First Lady.
Right.
They pose this really direct challenge in the source. What policy did she drive? What reform did she own? What did she initiate that didn't have a rainbow-colored logo or a celebrity endorsement? So the sources highlight this perception, their perception, that her focus was maybe more on symbolism than, say, measurable policy change.
And they use her gardening work as an example, right? They say, okay, vegetables are crucial, but then add this sarcastic layer.
Yeah, what was it?
Especially if you're trying to combat obesity by telling poor kids to eat kale instead of vending machine cookies, their schools are being cut. It's pretty pointed.
It is. And this commentary suggests her brand was about being above politics while secretly throwing political punches. They even bring up her famous line, "When they go low, we go high," and contrast that with reports mentioned in the source of the Obamas buying another house, Martha's Vineyard, D.C., Beverly Hills, when critics went low.
And that ties directly into this concept the source really emphasizes, performative populism. That's the phrase they use.
Performative populism, okay.
Yeah, described as cosplay for the political elite. The commentary states, and it's quite a quote, "Fascinating how the people who claim to fight for the working class somehow keep ending up in vineyards with billionaires giving speeches about sacrifice in $3,000 dresses."
Wow.
So this phrase, performative populism, it's used by the source to signal what they see as a disconnect. Public figures may be presenting themselves one way, championing the working class, often through symbols.
Right, the symbols again.
Exactly. While their own circumstances or actions might suggest something different, it really raises that question. When is public action genuinely about policy, and when is it more about, crafting an image?
Building on that, the idea of image and brand, the sources then shift focus. They look at her media presence, the big deals. Rogan and Bette David specifically mention her $100 million media deal.
With Netflix.
Yeah, with Netflix. And they question how someone supposedly all about the people would sign a deal like that. They also critique documentaries, suggesting they forget to mention all the lobbyists her husband invited into the West Wing, or how they framed Wall Street versus Obama's administration's role in the recovery funds.
And this analysis, it goes broader than just the deals. It's about her general media portrayal and how that shapes how people see her. The source points to, like, typical YouTube search results. You find her having fun in carpool karaoke or with Ellen DeGeneres.
Right, later stuff.
Yeah, much lighter stuff, not necessarily deep dives into policy.
Yeah.
And the critique gets quite sharp here. They argue she's empowering women by reading speeches written by interns who Googled feminism 5 minutes before lunch. Yeah. It implies this persona that's carefully crafted as a lifestyle brand. That's the term they use.
Lifestyle brand. Like a product, almost.
Kind of. The source suggests her public image is presented like, focusing on aspirational things, morning routines, affirmation journals, and zero accountability. That's how they put it. Essentially painting her as a Pinterest board in human form. All vibes, no receipts.
All vibes, no receipts. That's memorable. And the source even mentions her podcast with her brother as like another piece of this media focus.
Yeah, exactly. Part of that broader media ecosystem.
And this focus on media and entertainment, it leads Rogan and Bette David in the source to this pretty provocative thought about her maybe running for president.
Sure.
They suggest that maybe America doesn't want policy anymore. It wants brand management. It wants vibes. And they even offer the satirical campaign slogan.
What was it?
Hope to. Same font, more filtered selfies.
It's a really sharp take on, modern politics and communication. Now, the conversation in the source material, it also goes into some, frankly, deeply controversial areas. This includes the unfounded Michelle Obama is a man conspiracy theory. The source attributes it first to Joan Rivers and then later quotes Joe Rogan repeating it.
Yes, that's in the source material.
And just to be clear, our purpose here is simply to present this content from the source impartially. It's an example of the kind of extreme, baseless, and frankly personal commentary she faces, and how these sorts of claims are sometimes used by critics.
And that actually highlights a broader point the source itself makes. It says, people get mad when you question figures like her because they've been turned into symbols.
Right. So when you critique the symbol, the source argues, people act like you're attacking the meaning they attach to it. Rogan and Bette David even talk about an instance where Barack Obama posted a picture of her, and it apparently drew public criticism. It suggests even small things can spark intense reactions when someone becomes such a potent symbol.
And throughout this, Rogan and Bette David seem to consistently push back against the idea that style equals strategy. They suggest things like coordinated cardigans and arm workouts are a substitute for real policy grit.
That's the implication.
They argue, kind of cynically, that if positivity were power, she'd be a dictator by now. They use these descriptions again, like a Pinterest board in human form.
Right, that came up before.
Or someone who inspires people in the same way as caffeine and auto-tune TikToks. It's a very specific and pretty cutting critique of what they see as a focus on aesthetics over, substance.
Yeah, and it's quite compelling how the source material concludes its argument. It says, Michelle Obama's greatest political move wasn't in office. It was convincing people she was above politics while quietly reinforcing the same system, just with better lighting, smooth jazz, and a best-selling memoir.
That's a powerful statement.
It is. And the commentary suggests, essentially, that the wizard is just a marketing team with a TikTok strategy, implying that perception management itself is maybe the real power play in public life today.
So this deep dive into these particular sources, it suggests their view is that the myth walked into a room full of actual questions and came out looking like a motivational speaker who wandered off course into a Senate hearing. It's a strong argument from them that aesthetics beat action, the speech beats the substance.
And, in an age where, as the source puts it, public speaking is policy making, our own understanding of, knowledge and how it's applied becomes really critical. It raises this important question, I think, for all of us listening. How do we actually distinguish between genuine policy impact and just a really compelling narrative, especially when charisma feels like currency?
Yeah.
And a public figure is presented, as the source frames it, as a skilled communicator wrapped in a myth sold by a marketing firm. What does it really take for us to ask the hard questions and maybe look beyond that curated image?